Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with the Superlative Podcast. My guest today is Alan Tsao of Tsao Baltimore, a small watch brand. Alan, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So you are in the cohort of individuals known as the micro brand, as I like to call it, the enthusiast-run brand, micro brand. You know, there's just a lot of different interesting ways of sort of talking about the segment, but you are part of this community right now. What led you to the decision to start a little watch brand?
Well, it was an ongoing process. You know, like a lot of us, we really love watches. You know, I got my first watch when I was 10 years old. It was an old orange Fossil watch. I still have that thing. Ever since then, I've always had a watch on my wrist, always asked for a new watch for Christmas, you know, and then it kind of escalated where, you know, after college, got the day job. And then next thing you know is, I was like, I have some money, so I should probably spend some more money on some watches. And then started buying more and more watches until one night my wife is like, Alan, you got to stop buying so many watches. You could just start your own company. So she was joking, but background is in marketing and design. So I started designing 50, 60 different watches until I finally finished one that I loved. And I knew if I loved it that much, someone else had to too. So that kind of went into the whole figure out how to do everything, when to do it, who to contact, how to get the funds to even start this thing. Started asking a lot of questions, talking to other brands and figuring things out. And then next thing you know is we have a Kickstarter campaign, and then the rest is history.
That's very astute of your wife. What led her to understand that that's actually something you could do? Because it's not, I think, something you take for granted where it's like, oh, I like something, I'll start my own brand. Like, you can't do that with cars, right? You can't do that with like houses. Like, I love houses, I'll just build my own.
Build my own house, yeah.
But with watches, you know, what led her to at least familiarize yourself with the idea that this could be done?
So I'm very entrepreneurial. I have a big entrepreneurial background, whereas prior to the watch company, you know, I had a marketing company that we would just build websites, do a little small-based digital marketing campaigns, SEO. And I had like this little startup. It was basically Facebook Marketplace before Marketplace existed.
Okay.
So we were developing that until Marketplace launched. So that kind of put a nail on it. But I've always been very entrepreneurial. Wanted to do something and start something from scratch and build it from there. So I've always been in that world, just figuring out how things worked.
How many years have you been doing the watch game so far?
We started the company in technically 2017.
Okay. So we're like 6 years into it now. How does this sort of compare to your other entrepreneurial efforts? I don't know how old you are, but I imagine you don't have like, you know, decades and decades of work experience. My question is this been about average for you, or is this taking a lot more of your attention than some of your other ventures?
Oh no, this is 1,000% more successful than any other venture that I've done.
It's successful. Okay, and as a result, you've been giving it a lot of attention because it's been working out well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
what do you think? Go ahead.
So I actually went full time with watches end of 2022. So it was definitely something that was coming. I was working in before watches. I was in property management. I was the advertising director for a company in Maryland that had roughly 10,000 multifamily units. So I was doing that for 11 years, and then it was just time.
Okay. So it feel good to work for yourself?
Oh yeah. It feels a lot better. A lot better. So
a lot of people, you know, that's what pulls them to the watch industry. It's some ability to work for themselves. I guess you could say that was with me, though that was not specifically my goal at the time. But I ended up working for myself and enjoying that. A lot of your colleagues, there's this idea in this space that you can make something big by yourself. And that opportunity, I mean, you've looked around, doesn't exist everywhere right now. Like, that's a rare opportunity to quote unquote do it yourself, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's definitely tough. I mean, it's not easy. That's why not many people do it. So it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah. So you decided you wanted to make a watch brand because your wife's good advice. Now, obviously, you had seen others, right? Because Kickstarter had been a thing for not quite a decade at that point in 2017, but it was definitely at a golden time for Kickstarter. So it was very popular, and all you needed to do is pay attention for a few weeks, and it was clear that new brands were popping up, and that maybe you could do it as well. Talk a little bit about some of the mistakes you did not want to make, right? You had already seen some other brands doing similar stuff. What were you like, no, I want to avoid doing that?
I wanted to, right from the get-go, I wanted to create something unique, something different. When I was looking on Kickstarter, I was seeing a lot of, Submariner homages and a couple of other watches here and there that looks very similar to other watches. And I wanted to be different. And I want to really create a unique piece. And just my approach to doing it was kind of different, where I focused a lot of my attention on pre-launch marketing. So a lot of lead generation and getting people interested in the watches before launching on Kickstarter. Because a lot of people have that perception of Kickstarter being this very good platform where you launch a product and it's super successful. Whereas realistically, Kickstarter is a platform. It's just a platform. It kind of goes with the saying as, if a tree falls down and no one is around to hear it, does it actually make a noise? That's the same thing as any Kickstarter.
In other words, you have to do all your own marketing. Kickstarter is not going to get you famous.
Right. If you have a Kickstarter and you don't tell anyone, it doesn't exist.
So you knew that Kickstarter was a great platform. You knew you needed to do your own marketing. I know what you're talking about in terms of getting interest before the product is there. But let's be specific about this. And this is a relatively modern phenomenon where Kickstarter and sort of pre-order world now says, you know what, you're going to pay a lower amount of money for something, you as the consumer, in exchange for a product not being available yet. You are crowdfunding the production of something that we want to make. Without folks like you, we wouldn't be able to do it. But if we went the corporate route or whatever, it'd be a lot more expensive. So it's this interesting kind of deal with the consumer. And it's obviously proved very successful for a lot of different types of products and services. And it's been employed in the watch industry for more than a decade now. What are some of the interesting challenges you found into getting people to spend money on a watch before the watch existed?
With any new company, new brand, it's really adding credibility to it, giving people reassurance that you're creating this product and the product you're creating is going to be delivered. So really, you're developing a relationship with all the backers, all the people, all the supporters. And that's kind of how your marketing has to go. And it's just really developing that connection prior to actually providing the product. And I think that was the tough part, just because we were just brand new in 2017. We were posting in the different Facebook groups, the watch groups, the different forums. But other than that, it was just a lot of just getting our name out there, making people know that we do exist, we're real people, and we have a real product.
So I guess there's two interesting challenges there. One is packaging the story, right? Because that's really what it is. It's telling why we're doing this, and this is why you should back us. And then after you do that, you then need to spread that message out there. And you said you were doing a lot of legwork where you're going to forums and things like that and being like, hey, you seem to be the type of people I want to sell to. What do you think about my thing? And it was a lot of that type of legwork. You had to go out there and, if it was the real world, you'd go to an event with like a pouch and be like, here's my prototypes. What do you think?
Or,
and this is sort
nice
of the digital equivalent. Yeah, however you want to dress, right? Presentation, that's on the marketer. But going in there and getting their attention and saying, hey, I'm a cool guy, back me. What's I think fascinating about it is that you are being purchased as much as the product. In fact, in some instances, you as the backer of the team are being purchased more than the product.
Yeah, 100%. It's people are supporting you. And if the product's good, they're also supporting the product. But the real selling point is you as the owner, as the founder. And yeah, you're just selling yourself.
So you said that the first product was something that you wanted to be original. Is it on your website right now? Because I think know off the top of my mind what your debut Kickstarter watch was.
The very first one was called the Founder's Edition.
Okay.
So it was just a very simple, clean piece.
The Bremont-esque one?
Kind of, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
okay,
back in 2017, it was, yeah. Yeah, it's
the
definitely,
case.
It was a fun piece, but it was all,
you're not
it was
the
actually
only one.
it was one single case style. So Bremont used the case was designed in two parts, but
I think it was three pieces.
One part. Yeah, but mine was one piece.
They've indoctrinated me into the way of the triptych case very, very many times. But it was successful.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's interesting where Bremont is now. Just there, where their design-esque is going towards. But it's just fun.
Not going to be as emulatable right now. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, well, that's the thing. Their designs. I'm not knocking Bremont. It's a cool company. I mean, it kind of looks like a tag at the same time. It's more commercialized, but it makes sense because they have a lot of investors in there.
I'll say this about them. You know, I've been there since their beginning, and I've seen the comments over the years. And I remember that for many years, people would complain that they were sort of like trying to package Britishness. I'm not British, so I'm like, oh, I don't mind that. People complained about the value proposition, but people always liked the designs. And the most flattery that Bremont ever got was a lot of people copying that case design or making their version of it. So that's a really big form of flattery. They made a design impact. And I think that looking back on at least the first decade or so of the brand, people are going to sort of look at it a lot more fondly than sort of some of the negative comments people can remember, because they did do a lot. And the design legacy lives on because they had a nice package.
True.
It was a gentleman's sports watch, which is a hard thing to find in a good package, right?
It's true.
So just to sort of explain. And look, you can't go all wild right away. I mean, you ask any marketer, if you shock a consumer with something too fresh, they're going to just reject it because they don't know what it is. You got to be like, you can't copy, but you need to be familiar. And that's an unfortunate fact. When did you realize that? Because again, as a watch lover, I mean, you know what's out there. The impetus is to be original, but also when you want to make money, the impetus is to be commercial. How do you strike that balance between familiarity and originality?
So there's a very thin line between that, but it's kind of like you're trying to create a watch that you like, your perfect watch. So how I design a watch, it's usually, instead of buying a watch, I have this itch for a new watch. Instead of buying a new watch, it's creating that perfect watch that I want to buy. So fortunately, a lot of my designs are very, generally accepted in terms of, everyone. It's not really out there, the design. So it's safe, but it works.
So let me understand your design process, because I'm interested in that. You imagine a watch. You're like, I want this dial, hands, case combination to exist. As far as I know, it doesn't yet. I want to make that happen and see if I like it, if it brings me joy. Is that the design process?
For the most part. I mean, there's a lot. So how I design is usually, it starts with that. And then with me, I design it. I don't look at it for 2 days. I put it aside, come back to it in 2 days. If I like it, I'll improve it. If I don't, I'll scratch it. Usually this process takes 3 or 4 times during every single design. So it's always scratching, always redoing, and then always improving beyond that. But it's just a process. It just takes a long time.
Well, look, I think it's interesting because to understand the micro brand community, the startup brand community, whatever, you also have to understand that the founder is going to be a different type of personality. Some are artists, some are engineers, some are what you would just call a designer who makes nice things. Some are not artistic at all and sort of like the vibe, and they need to hire a visual designer to make it a reality. There's a lot of different sort of vectors to being a brand founder, and not all of them involve, I know exactly what I want. I think in a lot of ways, you're actually an exception, because for the most part, you are your own focus group. You're like, Alan, do I like it? Yes, great. No? Okay, we're not doing this.
I usually ask my wife.
Well, but again, you're the final judge, right? You have the director's cut. It's up to you at the end of the day. And you also presumably have the technical skills to at least make a rudimentary, I'm guessing at the least, visual representation so that a technical person can turn it into a schematic of some type.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I design everything on Illustrator, and then we have someone that does create a 3D CAD of it.
Do you like using Illustrator? Is that a good tool to do that for people?
I like using Illustrator just because of the flexibility, but I grew up on Adobe, just utilizing all their platforms, Photoshop, Premiere, but that's just how I started. There's a whole bunch of other options, but just Illustrator just works for me.
There's a lot of people out there I think would really enjoy, just from an enthusiast perspective, designing their own dials and stuff like that. And I've never seen a single piece of content or conversation, not saying it hasn't existed, where people just talk about these are the software tools you should use that are relatively easy to learn or at least oriented for this purpose. Because the final tools that you would use to make these production ready are far more advanced than any enthusiast is going to be able to easily pick up. This is complicated engineering software, essentially, that goes into CNC machines. Like, this is not simple stuff. But just getting the basic, like a vector image that you're doing with Illustrator is good. Illustrator is not the easiest thing to pick up. But it's interesting. Do you have you ever seen a conversation about watch design software? What works, what doesn't?
No, not something that's officially about watches. It's usually about creating specific shapes and or 3D layouts, and then just applying those same tools into designing a watch. So it's not necessarily focused on watches, but each component plays a role in it.
I would like to do that. I would like to find someone who has competency with a few of these pieces of software and just go with them and see as me, because I'm visual, but I didn't get too much behind like drawing with my hand, right? So like if it's not using like straight lines in MS Paint, like I'm not going to be able to build it in software. But if someone showed me like, hey, Ariel, for someone like you that kind of knows what you like but doesn't know how to learn new software, these are good tools. I bet other people out there would love that, because wouldn't it be great to see more concept art from the community? I feel like people talk a big game, but I'd like to see more people being like, hey, I talked a big game about this dial. What do you think about it?
No, we're actually seeing that a lot in the different like Facebook groups. Just people drawing up or designing just styles and saying, hey, thinking about launching this piece. What do you guys think? I'm definitely seeing that a lot more and more, which is really cool, because it's just really helping, really growing the community and really making a very supportive community at that.
So I was just now looking on aBlogtoWatch, because trying to find what year I primarily started to do this series. I worked with a great guy, a designer and a photographer, Bo Hudspeth, and we did a series called Watch What If. And what I would do is I would take a popular watch and I would say, let's use this as a base and change it. And it looks like from about 2011 to maybe in 2016 were the last ones, where we did this, and we took a bunch of watches and we just changed little things about it. We made different versions of it, and it was great. And it was really hard to find a community of people that wanted to do that or that could understand that. So it seems easy, but to understand how to do this requires a lot of watch culture, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it takes a lot. It's just a lot.
So let's talk about that in terms of design direction, because it's very easy to say, I want this design. It's another thing to say, can I build it? Is it affordable to build? Talk a little bit and go into some detail about sort of this merging of the visual idea with the reality of what I can afford to make or what just can be made.
Sure. I mean, so it's a breakdown of, obviously, the movement is the first option. The movement is what really determines the type of watch. And then, of course, if you have a style in mind, then you have to figure out the movement, which type of movement. You want automatic, you want quartz, which automatic, which quartz, Miyota, Seiko, Swiss, so forth. And then you kind of just dive in deeper and figure out, okay, if it's a Miyota, it's a three-hander, it's let's go with three-hander, and then just kind of figuring out how detailed do you want the dial to go? Do you want sunburst? Do you want texture? Do you want so forth? Then, of course, you can get really in detail with, handcrafted work or hand-painted work into the dials. So it all depends on how many details and how many features you want in a single piece. That really determines the ultimate cost of the watch. And of course, if you want it water resistant, then it adds a little bit of thickness to it, additional gaskets and so forth. So it's just a lot of figuring out all the different features, what you want into a watch, and then that's just a breakdown of the cost after that.
So it starts with the movement, which is a sort of practical way of going about it. Have you ever gone down the route of making your own movement to have a complication or a feature you want, or making a module? Have you tried to do that, or have you been very practical and been like, let's just go with what exists. We don't want to change anything. I don't want those headaches. So
we actually have a movement we call the MD1. Our watchmaker, okay. He's in Maryland. It's based on the ETA 2824. Okay. But instead, that movement is assembled in Maryland instead. That's why we call it the MD1. But it's basically a 2824. We just redecorated a little bit, blacked everything out, either blue or rose gold screws on there, regulated to plus or minus 8 seconds in accuracy. That's all done in-house.
And is that the type of thing that you find that the consumer likes, is willing to pay premium for, or would you have been, in the same exact position, just having a 2824 or like a Sellita?
It depends. Depends on the market. If we're focusing more local in Maryland, Baltimore, then the MD1 does really well. And we can really sell it with the being in the MD1. If we're going more national or international approach, that doesn't have as strong of a, decision maker for the consumer, but they do appreciate that we're trying to do things more in-house. So it does play a small role in the ultimate decision of buying a watch.
I want to go back to the business side and talking about Kickstarter and crowdfunding. Is crowdfunding and Kickstarter something you still do today? And if not, why? And when did you move on past that?
The original idea, because funds were very limited, I had enough funds for just the prototypes. Fortunately, when I started the prototypes, we got initial prototypes, and the prototypes were just absolutely terrible. It was terrible. So we had to restart everything. So spent close to $15,000 in just prototypes alone before even starting the Kickstarter. So I knew Kickstarter was the best option because it was the most, crowdfunding, limited resources, best bang. So I also had to find creative ways to generate more interest, more leads. So back then it wasn't really as popular, but it is more popular now. But it's a way to gamify lead generation. So you would sign up, you would get X amount of points. You refer someone, they sign up, you also get more points. You share, you do whatever, any action, you get points. And then ultimately, the more points you get
that
potentially.
Work?
It worked. You could potentially win a free watch. That was how our campaign was.
So you're actually able to get people to refer other people that way.
Mm-hmm. So they actually did the legwork of it. While we just, we did a limited budget in our ads, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, and there's really just people sharing it and referring their friends to share it. So it was a really cool referral network. With our first campaign,
how do you do that in a way so that the friends don't get upset? Because I can see in some situations hey, you signed me up for a marketing list. Why would you do that? How do you avoid that?
It wasn't signing up. You would just share it on your Facebook. And if your friends click that link and they also sign up, then that's when you get that referral
so it's
link.
Like an affiliate style.
Exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm. And that worked really well back then. It slowly kind of got a little scammy years after that, but we were kind of in the mix of when it was at its prime, which is perfect timing. We were actually
What year was that? Would you say it was at
2017?
Was that 2000? Yeah.
2016, 2017 is when that was. We were posting on the different Facebook groups. People wanted, in the, watch group, people wanted a free watch. They're like, okay, let me just sign up. So we were able to generate at that time, roughly 1,500, 2,000 emails and only spending maybe $500 in ads.
No, I want to comment on this because I think you've touched on something fascinating. First of all, this sort of period is over. So we're talking about some history right now. And what happened was that social media platforms had these advertising tools that were kind of complicated, right? You had to sort of like hunt, you got to figure it out, sort of this really kind of creative thing. There's no classes on it. No corporate entities are really involved, but these tools existed. And what you could do is access a huge number of people, and you can focus on just their interests. And because you could see the effectiveness right away, you could sort of play around, A/B test, experiment all the time. And so for a period of several years, until sort of like the bigger interests got involved, and then all the scams happened with political stuff, a marketer could just go wild and try all this different stuff. You knew you could get your message in front of people. The only trick was getting them to do something with that message. But it was cheap and easy to get in front of the right people if only you could convince them to take action.
Right.
And so there was this whole industry of people, and there was mostly people who were following, right? So there was a very small number of people coming up with new techniques because it was hard to do and required psychology. But then this larger community of people being like, what's the latest techniques? So it was this weird game between the creatives trying something new because audiences would very quickly get inoculated to techniques, trying something new, and then everyone else being like, oh, that works now? We'll copy that, right? And that was the weird cat and mouse game, if you will, for a number of years until privacy laws changed. Again, corporate dollars came in. There was more scrutiny, bad actors. But for at least a decade or so, maybe a little bit less, it was an interesting time to be in online marketing, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
How would you add to that?
No, everything was new. Everything was fresh. So there was no regulating to a sense.
Yeah.
Because no one knew about it. Anything new and innovative was just out there. And then, again, where you said, that's when the scams started coming. People started figuring out, okay, people are actually using this and it's successful. How can we make more money out of it? How can we just, get more money and take more money? So yeah, it just got pretty bad. But during that time, it was just fun. It was just, everything was marketing. Everything was just being creative, just doing what you think is going to be right and then doing it.
I remember that when I got started, and I've told this story before, I think it's funny. When I started in 2007, most blogs were about how to blog or how to make money blogging, right? It wasn't about what we were supposed to do was have about a topic like aBlogtoWatch and watches. It was about how to do this thing that we're doing. It was kind of this circular, hilarious thing. And I think a lot of podcasts are about podcasting, right? I think a lot of video shows are about how to make money doing that. And so there's this very robust community of the content being designed for other people that want to make the content. And ultimately, I don't think the world benefits as a result, but it's sort of hilarious how popular it is, right? It's
That's very true. Very true. All it is just content.
Yeah, content for content's sake. It's sort of it's this funny thing, and I mean, you and I guess, grew up in the industry where there was articles written just to have an article written, right? Where before it was like, why would you waste 3,000 words? But those Kickstarter things, I remember, you could scroll for an enormous amount of time. Reading the numerous things these, the Kickstarter campaign owners wanted you to know, whether it was concept art or here's a facility or here's a bunch of charts, but it was just, it was argument after argument after argument after argument. You sort of wear down the defenses of the consumer, where at some point they're like, okay,
next.
That's what it was, right?
It was. It's just a giant catalog of just information, and it's just a lot. But it was good. I mean, it worked.
Do you think that Kickstarter phase was necessary for the sort of enthusiast-run brand era to exist? Because even if that funding approach is no longer viable, don't you agree it sent the message out there that not any individual, but an individual with enough motivation and some wisdom can start a brand? Like, that message is out there almost permanently now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great platform just to get started, and it gives everyone an opportunity to jump on and try to create their own brand, design their own watch, and build it and actually make it happen. It's just their opportunity. It also helps with market research, figuring out if you're getting supporters, obviously it's a good product. If you're not getting supporters, it gives you an option to cancel the Kickstarter and just redesign and try again. So it doesn't cost anything, and it's just a safer option for new entrepreneurs in any product development company that they're trying to do.
Today, as I understand it, you fund productions of inventory, and by the time you start to market them, I presume they're ready or close to being ready, or is that not how it works right now?
It's a mix. So it depends on the watch. We do a mix of pre-orders, and maybe we ship out in a month. We did do a pre-order in January, which actually ships out next month. So there's a waiting period depending on the product. But everything is in production prior to the pre-order. It just takes some time because we do have some manufacturing delays here and there.
I'm very fascinated by the public's appetite to spend money on a product before it's available. I obviously believe that it has been proven as viable. I don't know how sustainable it is. I guess my question for you, as someone who's done a lot of these pre-order campaigns, do you feel that it's becoming harder and harder given the competition with watches that are already available? Or as long as it's managed appropriately, do you think that for the foreseeable future, brands will get to enjoy, receiving money before they actually have a product? Because from a brand perspective, this is a great position. Consumers obviously want to buy a product. Please tell me your thoughts about where you think this is going with.
I mean, it depends. Well, with us, because we have a large customer base, really loyal customers, so they're willing to do the pre-order and wait several months to get their watch because they're familiar with how we just run business. That's just how we've done everything. Just done pre-orders, and just once it launches, we increase the price, and then we have them readily available, and then we launch a new design on pre-order, and then the process continues. In terms of long-term, we, of course, would like to really have everything in production and then launch. Problem is there's a huge waiting period in between designs. So as a business, we want to keep cash flowing and everything. So it's hard to maintain the business and keep on pushing ads and so forth to do new designs without having cash coming into the business. So having the pre-order really helps with that because it keeps the process continuing. But, ultimately we'd like to have our watches readily available once someone orders. And that's probably the goal for next year. As we go into 2025, it's just once something's available, we may have a pre-order for like 2 weeks if we wanted to, and then just ship after that.
Is it something that you think is necessary? You talked about cash flow and things like that. And again, I'm just looking at the extreme, and the extreme is that customers are far less willing to go ahead and spend money on a product they don't have. Is that a necessary component to the viability of the sort of size, which is relatively small, of businesses like yours and your colleagues?
I mean, I'd say so. Pre-orders just help, especially with small businesses like us, micro brands. We don't necessarily have that much capital in hand to fully fund a collection, depending on how large the collection is. Granted, if we launch a new collection and only do 100 watches, we could easily just launch it and be readily available. But usually with our production, we do anywhere between 500 to 700 for each collection. So there's a little bit more to it, a lot more capital involved into doing it. But any small business, I think it definitely helps small companies, to really get their feet in it and really, really have the capital to promote their brand and promote themselves and really get the ball rolling.
Is there ever a desire to be an acquisition target? And I'm not saying there should be or there shouldn't be, but I think that there are certain founders such as yourself who love the idea of being bought out at some point. And there's others who say, you know what, this is fun. I can sort of go at my own pace. I can see myself doing this for a very, very long time. Where do you sort of fall into that dichotomy?
Well, it's a mix because we we have a few different business models under the Tsao Baltimore umbrella. We're developing this new material that's going to be incredibly tough, basically titanium and carbonate material that's super scratch resistant, super durable. So there's a local company that we're doing a lot of R&D with to create this material. Then there's another side that we're actually developing this NFT authentication platform. We're working with several different crypto companies to really authenticate high-end goods from watches, purses, shoes, and so forth. Any tangible product of value.
Not easy.
Not easy at all. Not easy at all. But we're hoping we have a beta at the end of the year. But we're basically developing that side. So there's a whole bunch of small subsidiaries under the Tsao Baltimore brand, and that would be a goal to sell one of those subsidiaries outside of it. That'd be pretty cool.
That's interesting. I mean, I guess it's good to sort of go into it open-minded that a lot of different things could happen. I try to advise people on being realistic about it. If you want to be bought, who's going to buy you? Will they be able to make money without you? Right. Are you offering something so amazing? Oftentimes, it's the catalog of consumers that you have, which is more valuable than your product. I think it's unreasonable to expect a brand that's been around for 2 or 3 years or even 5 years to have a product which is so iconic that, other people could run the company and still be desirable. Companies that are much older than that, with more established products, they have an issue with that. I mean, I think, for example, the famous story about in the late 90s, Jean-Claude Biver purchasing Hublot that was, about 20 years old at that time, and he got for pennies on the dollar. It was losing money. They have, that's a more common experience, right?
Oh yeah.
Than, oh my God, I quadrupled my money, stuff like that.
Just the next day.
Yeah, it's a very challenging thing to go ahead and think of yourself as being an acquisition target. But again, the future is so ripe in this space. I tell people all the time, I don't know how people are going to be buying watches and from what types of stores or what types of price points. All I know is that for as long as I can foresee, people are going to like watches. Beyond that, I'm not really sure what behavior is going to be like.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. I mean, that's the thing with having all these micro brands. It creates this really cool interest in watches, even though maybe they might have just started, getting interested in watches, and then a friend referred them to micro brands, the world of micro brands, a whole new rabbit hole of interest. So it's just interesting to see all these brands come up and have all these new designs out in the world. It really helps broaden the consumer's idea of a watch, because normally they would go to like a Zales, go online to the mall or buy like a Tissot, a Citizen or whatever. And they think that's the only options. So having this whole microbrand world really enhances the community and really grows the community to really enjoy watches. Like, they're basically a part of a company when they're supporting a brand, because we're all small businesses. So they're supporting the founders, the designs, the watches, the brand itself, and they're a part of the company. Because at the end of the day, you want that super loyal customer that's going to basically defend you in any, if someone says something on a Facebook group or something and they badmouth something, either it's customer service. I've seen this hundreds of times in the different Facebook groups. People will defend you from different brands. Like, no, you should probably just talk to the company. I've had only the best customer service. Just talk to them and they'll make it right. And so those are the people that's defending the brand. It's really cool. And
that's popular. That defense is popular. If you do your job and you make them feel positive and cared for, they'll defend you, like you said.
Yeah. And at that point, the brand owner probably doesn't even have to respond, because the peer-to-peer is a lot stronger than having a founder talk to that individual himself. So it just works. And it creates a really strong community, and it grows the community because people just, watches are just awesome.
I don't really even know what can be said about community, because I think we're just going to have an agreement on this matter. But community is a sort of necessary part of success right now. You have to feel that there is a group of people out there that you speak to, that you can connect to, who are listening to the next thing you say. By definition, you're speaking to some people and not everybody. But I think it's important to say out there that if you are an enthusiast-run brand, a small brand, a micro brand, part of your model has to be developing, maintaining, and speaking to a community that you hope is going to be the backbone of much of your sales.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, they are the foundation of any micro brand. Without them, a micro brand is just, someone that's trying to sell some watches. It's the community behind that brand that really creates the brand and brand's identity. It really makes them stronger into the community and makes them more credible. So it's the community that you build, and without their support, we wouldn't be here. And it's just, it's a mutual understanding.
Is it difficult to do community building today? You got into it when I think it was easier. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of people out there today, but you speak to people who are, just now starting even brands. What are people saying about the challenges and opportunities and community building amongst watch enthusiasts today?
I mean, that's a tough question. Building community is easier said than done, but it's just really just getting out there, talking to people, creating connections, creating relationships, going to events, Wind Up, Intersect, doing these events and really talking to the customers, talking about not only the watches, but who you are, who they are, create that relationship. Because at the end of the day, it's more than just a watch. It's the brand that you're trying to buy into. So they just want to know who you are as a person, what your goals are in the company. As long as those kind of align with the customer's point of view, I mean, you're creating a really strong relationship.
One of the things I think is important to say about the enthusiast watch community is that it seems to have a price ceiling. And what I mean by this is that at a certain price point, people are no longer interested in backing an up-and-comer. They want to buy from an established brand. It's only after they've had a huge amount of buying expensive watches from established brands that they might go back to an up-and-comer. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to say exactly what that price threshold is. It's probably in the $2,000 or $3,000 price point before most people would just simply want to go to a more established brand. Many would argue it's closer to $1,000. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed that there is this threshold? Do you think it's going to increase in the future? What do you think that threshold has been for your brand?
I mean, I think it has steadily increased, just because of the cost to manufacture, the tooling costs and so forth just increased. But, when we started our brand in Kickstarter, we were selling the watch for $250, which is ridiculous. Okay. The first year we lost closer to $15,000, $20,000 just because we didn't take into account shipping costs. If ever it needs a repair, we'll come back, then we ship it back. That's additional cost.
Right.
So it's just, costs that we just didn't realize. But that threshold is probably, I think it's right at the $1,300 mark. Anything above that, people start looking into name brands, larger brands. Okay. That's why with our watches, I think we are average around $600. Our lowest price one is $350. But it's roughly in that ballpark. But it's interesting because it is a moving threshold at the same time. People, depending on the year, depending on the month, the season, that threshold can be up, can be down. Like we've seen it, we get countless emails, for $700, I could just get XYZ. And then we would never get those emails. And then we would launch something at, $1,100. It's like, oh, for $1,100, I could get XYZ. So, but once we've stayed under $1,000 and we haven't got too many emails saying, for that price, I could get, a name brand. And they've actually, with more brands staying within the same price point, it kind of creates that support or that ground level support. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it definitely helps with the price points, because I don't think any brand, new brands don't necessarily realize the cost involved in, operating expenses and manufacturing. They just want to, launch a new watch at the lowest price because they think they're going to get the best customers, and it's just kind of it's a tough market once you really lower the price that far down.
It sure is. Now, obviously, you want to make something the consumer wants to buy, and the watch enthusiast consumer is very vocal, if anything. Mm-hmm. My question is, how effective is it to just listen to what they want? Obviously, there's a bunch of different things, so you can't do everything. But some people keep saying the same thing. If you do what they ask, does that lead to success? Or is it, as I presume, more complicated, and you have to use your own good taste and your own determination what the market needs rather than strictly follow what consumers say they want in terms of the communications they have that you see out there?
It's complicated because, yes, we would get so many emails of saying, you should do this, you should do that. We would go in the forums. People were saying, why can't there be a brand that does this, that does that, does this? It sounds really cool. Sounds great. But again, at the same time, it's one person saying that with a lot of people liking it or loving it. That doesn't necessarily count to a sale. So at the end of the day, it's kind of do what you're comfortable with and you believe will be successful, not necessarily taking those or not necessarily ignoring those comments or ignoring what the features. Maybe you could apply some of them, but not all of them. Because if you put all of them, all the features that people want, you're really hyper focusing your watch design to someone else's appeal, not your own. It kind of removes the soul of your designs, and you're kind of just creating a watch that someone else created.
It's very tricky to know what to make next, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, should I do a pilot style? Should I do a diver style? Should I do a casual, a dress watch? I love dress watches, but for some reason, dress watches just don't do well. I like small watches, 38. 39 millimeter, but then there's a huge market with that. But then you're also eliminating the market that needs 42 and up. So it's like, what can you do as a brand? And with limited resources, you just kind of pick your battles.
Have you had any surprise hits? And what I mean by that are watches that, you had confidence in, but you really had no idea people would like as much or there would be demand for?
I'd say we did a collaboration with this local beer company called National Bohemian. We call it Natty Bohs. They were originally brewed in Baltimore in 1885 or something like that. But we launched a moon phase watch with Natty Boh's logo as a moon and crabs as the stars. So it's a very Maryland-esque design.
Oh, that's what that is. I was seeing that on your homepage. I was like, I don't know this character.
Yeah, it's very iconic to Baltimore. Not many people outside of Maryland understand the Natty Boh relationship, but super iconic. And we signed a license agreement with Natty Boh, and we're like, okay, let's. The original idea was to create like 1885 during when they started. But I was like, it's a new license agreement. I'm not sure how successful this would do. So let's do a trial run. So the initial order was, we just did 410 being Baltimore's area code. So we did 410 and then it sold out in less than a month. So we're like, oh, okay. So then we started designing new colorways, like a vintage collection, a full loom collection. We'll have a DLC collection. But it was definitely a big surprise once we launched it, just how much support we were getting for this design, how fun it was, even though it's our most affordable timepiece. But it was also a good starter watch because we had plenty of customers that actually would buy the Natty Boh watch and then 2 weeks later come back and buy one of our pilot watches or one of our diver watches. So it's kind of it's a good introduction of our brand.
And it's also affordably priced, and I think that's actually a great example of surprise hit. I think it's a handsome timepiece. We don't have too much more time, and we didn't get to talk about the Baltimore part of the brand, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just you; it's also Baltimore, and I think for people who are not American, they know nothing about Baltimore. Even a lot of Americans don't know it.
True.
I've met a lot of very passionate watch lovers from Baltimore, very articulate people, I think. And again, I want you to correct me after I say this, because I want, again, people listening to this in Europe to know what's the city in the U.S. that they may have heard of but don't know about. Like many older U.S. cities, it has a combination of a very wealthy area and some more dilapidated areas.
Yep.
It's very strong weather, right? So it's a severe city to live in terms of the winters. Size-wise, I don't know. I think it's under 1 million people, right? So it's not one of LA. It's not an LA. It's not a New York. It's not a mega city. What are some of the cultural things that are important in Baltimore? What are some of the things that you grow up around? Is it old buildings? Is it some type of nice architecture that allows there to be both watch appreciation and actually a surprising number of entrepreneurs or people that worked in the watch industry, brand founders from Baltimore? I personally actually haven't even been to Baltimore.
Well, come on down.
I'd like to sometime. It's on my list, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Baltimore is just full of very interesting people, a lot of strong personalities. But Maryland has a lot of history. We're East Coast, so we have the ocean right there. We have Annapolis. We have the Naval Yard. We have yacht racing. We have the Baltimore Inner Harbor. So there's a lot of things of inspiration around Maryland, from the different historic ships here to we have Glen L. Martin Airport, which is now Martin State Airport. They made a lot of the World War II bomber planes. That's where we designed our pilot watch. So there's a lot of really cool military history around Maryland, which is nice.
Cool.
But we kind of bleed our Baltimore Ravens purple. We are Baltimore Orioles orange colors. Of course, we have our Old Bay spices. That's where the purple
comes from.
Yeah.
Now I understand.
Yep. Then we have our Old Bay spice. We put that thing on everything. But it's just Maryland, and we love our flag. If you can't notice, if someone's from Maryland, they probably have some kind of apparel or something associated with the Maryland flag, because it's just a beautiful flag.
The Maryland flag is what colors?
Yeah. I actually see it. So if you can see in my background, that's the movement with our Maryland flag. It's like a yellow, black, white, red.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. I'm from the West Coast, so I would not see Maryland stuff very often. I would have to be on the East Coast already. And again, Maryland is not a big state.
No, it's not. But we have a lot of pride. A lot of pride for our state. A lot of character. Honestly, it sounds in a lot of ways like some of the European cities that have great brands today, because you have a lot of culture, a lot of personality, layers of history, interesting, as you said, military production, stuff like that. It actually sounds like a great basis of a watch brand. So congrats. Absolutely. Thank you. That's exactly where we get our inspiration from, which is perfect.
There's been a lot of other cities in the United States that now are the home of little micro brands. It used to be like American Watch, and then they sort of focus a little bit more on the specific territories or things like that. Talk about sales to people that are not what you would say is a traditional watch lover, but a prideful person from Baltimore or Maryland or America who wants to wear a tool because they associate it with a place they come from. How big is that market? Meaning people buy it because of Baltimore versus it being a wristwatch.
I mean, it's huge. So we just opened up our showroom in January so people can actually see the watches in person. And everyone that comes in, that comes in, makes an appointment, they love the fact that, all our pieces are all assembled in Maryland. They love the fact that we have our Maryland flag and some of the movements. The story behind it is something around Baltimore, around Maryland, and they love the history behind it. Either, their parents or grandparents would work at Glen L. Martin, all the bomber planes, and they have this watch that's named after one of those bomber planes. Or if it's the submarine, their parents were in World War II in the Navy Yard, and they actually worked on that ship. So it's creating that really cool relationship, that really cool connection between, someone's interest or someone's family history, and really having a piece that they can be proud to wear, which is something cool.
Where do you take that side of the business? It's obviously a little bit less about the aesthetic, and it's more about creating additional local substance in the watch. You said assembly in Baltimore is a big part. Obviously, making the watch in America would be cool, but very, very difficult. Practically speaking, with the tools available to you and where you could feasibly invest, how do you refine and add to the Baltimore, Maryland story?
Well, obviously it would be to have everything manufactured in Maryland, or at least the major components. Really diving into other strong companies and creating like a cool collaborative piece that connects to multiple different consumers. With one of the pieces that we're actually in designing is the Francis Scott Key Bridge. We have 200 pounds of steel from that bridge, and we're actually going to be making watches out of it. We're going to be actually making the dials from that steel. And it was really tough because there's not many companies around here or the US that has the equipment to do that, the tooling to do that. But like for example, it took us. We contacted 5 different metal machinists around Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia to just cut the steel so we can actually create the dials, or just the disc itself, without even just creating the dials, just cutting the steel to create the discs. And we were, bounced around from company to company. And then, because we're so close to DC, a lot of the metal machinists here have these large government contracts with the different government. So it was kind of tough to say, hey, we want to create these watches, anywhere between 100 to 500 pieces. Let me know how much it's going to cost. And they would kind of go different directions. They say, okay, you could do wire EDM to help cut the steel. It's probably the most precise and way to eliminate a lot of waste. So that's the best option. Unfortunately, that process is super expensive because we use that on our rockets and basically putting things into space, utilizing that process. Like, okay, cool. So, they'll refer me to one person, to the next person.
How thin can they get it with a wire EDM cut? How thin can the dial be?
So we can probably get it to, we can get it as thin as 1 millimeter. But with our disc, we'll probably get to 2 to 3 millimeters, because we're actually...
That's a thick dial.
So it's thick as the raw material is, but we're actually going to be laser engraving the entire dial. So we're eliminating the negative space. So the hour markings, minute markings, chapter ring, everything is going to be a part of one single piece of steel. That way we don't have to worry about, applying the indices or everything. The only thing we're applying is the loom on the chapter ring. So it's going to be a really interesting piece. So we'll see where that goes. But 100% of those profits are actually going to the families of those victims. So it's actually for a good cause too.
Okay, yeah, because there were victims. That was such a crazy tragedy.
It was a crazy tragedy, and I just remember when I found out, it was in the middle of the night. I have 2 little ones. My youngest, he cried at night, so I woke up. I was rocking him back to sleep. And then I would just check my email. I would get an email from a customer in Poland. He's like, oh my God, Alan, I hope you're okay. I hope your family's okay. I heard about the bridge. I was like, what are you talking about? What's this bridge? And then next thing you know, I look in the news, I just type in bridge, and then there you go. Francis Scott Key Bridge is everywhere. And then,
is that a bridge that you use? Like, does that have prominence in your life?
So that bridge is more on the southeast side. I come from the north of the city. Okay. So I don't really hit that bridge, but I have driven in that bridge several times, just going around to customers and different retail partners. But it's pretty wild because I would get emails from customers sending me pictures of their wedding photo. Their backdrop is the Key Bridge behind them, and now it's not there anymore. So it's just wild.
I hope you have a lot of orders because they have a lot of extra steel to get rid of. A huge amount of it.
Yeah. I mean, we have 200 pounds. We can make approximately 500 or so dials out of at least 100 pounds of it.
Okay. You need about a 5 million watch order to help even make a dent in the steel that they have.
Oh yeah. This is, I mean, you should see this. It's like this big, and that itself is like 40 pounds. Like, it's unbelievable how heavy this bridge is and how it collapsed so easily. It's just wild. But
I mean, the thing is this: it's like, it shouldn't be that surprising if you look throughout even recent human history. Like, a bridge collapse somewhere on a regular basis. Yeah. It's terrible all the time, but it's not like, oh my God, a bridge collapse. Like, bridges have been collapsing as long as people have been making bridges, which is thousands of years.
Yeah, it's true.
That's why it's a big deal to make a big, strong bridge, because of all the failures.
Yeah, exactly. It's just wild.
The hope is, right, this is the hope that they as they say, build back better. Like, make a bridge that survives a little bit more next time. That's the worry, that they'll make a crappier bridge.
Right. Well, apparently this bridge, it can withstand an impact, but the ship that hit it was apparently 6 times larger than what it was tested at.
Sure. Yeah.
Crazy.
So that's interesting. We're basically out of time. This has been really, really interesting to get to know you and Baltimore. So, Alan, maybe you could just let anyone know where on the internet they should go to learn more about you or Tsao Baltimore. What do you want to plug?
Yeah, so we're on Instagram, Facebook, just at Tsao Baltimore. Also online at tsaobaltimore.com.
This has been the Superlative Podcast interview with Alan Tsao, founder of Tsao Baltimore. Alan, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.